Hello everyone, and welcome to another comics review. This is what would have been for the month of November, and I have a feeling that I may have gone to the comic book store a little later in November than I would normally go. I normally try to go near the start of the month. In this one, I think I may have gone a little further in because there's a lot of issues for November, and a lot of new ones, but also some old ones as well. So uh, let's dive into this mess and make our way through it. And we're gonna start with something a little outside the norm. I found this two-part series. It was kind of on the shelf looking at me as I walked by a certain area of the store, and I went, yoink. It is a two-part series called Aliens Havoc. This is the first issue. This is the second. It tells the story of a derelict ship called the Lunar Maru, which was like this opulent kind of luxury vessel for people to travel on, and it mysteriously kind of lost contact and went missing, and then sent out one bit of an SOS, and then that's all. Nobody knew really what happened to it. So there's a crew, a salvage crew, that goes to check it out, and they find everybody on board dead. And of course, what do they run into? Xenomorphs. There's aliens on board the ship, but there's also a weird consciousness aboard the ship that keeps inhabiting the minds of this crew that have come to investigate, and it's, you know, kind of flitting from one person to the next, and kind of telling them what to do and what's happening, and what happened in the past, and what was going on the ship was that in the person whose consciousness this is it was like a scientist who was doing experiments with the xenomorph's royal jelly and some of the eggs and stuff like that, and his experiments went wrong. They were trying to experiment with, like, along the lines of how his consciousness is now able to inhabit their bodies. He was trying to find a way to get the alien consciousness to meld with human beings so they could try and understand them, or something to that effect. And of course, everything went horribly wrong, and the xenomorphs bred with about, I think it was like 10 humans, and then of course they grew up to be full size, so you got 10 aliens on board this ship. They're fucked, and you know they're fucked. So basically this consciousness of this scientist inhabits these people and tries to steer them through the danger of these xenomorphs and get them through this situation and fight them off, and kind of right the wrongs that he instigated by performing these experiments in the first place and letting things get so out of hand. And whether he did or not, I probably wouldn't hurt to tell you, because it's not like you're going to find these two comics anywhere unless you really look for them and really decide you want them. But I'm not going to tell you anyways. You can, if you never read the comics, you can just write the story yourself in your mind and decide what you want to happen. And the other cool thing about these two issues is that it was done by a bunch of different artists. So there's all these different styles of art through each issue. You get like the real serious heavy duty artwork where everything looks real and dark and mean, and then you get like Mad Magazine kind of comic art on the next page, right? So it's a really cool kind of diversity of look and feel and talent through these two issues. So pretty cool idea. I like it. Next up, and there is a ton of this month, the Ninja Turtles. We're going to start off with the Saturday Morning Adventures issue number 2. And in this one, Shredder comes to Krang asking for more help to take down the turtles, and Krang is like, okay, let me do this. And he brings a rock soldier named Thoom or something like that through from Dimension X, and they're like, Bebop and Rocksteady, you go with Thoom and you take out the turtles. And as soon as Thoom comes from, or I hope that's his name, as soon as he comes through from Dimension X, Bebop and Rocksteady are like listening to music on the beatbox, and fucking Rock Soldier's like, fucking turn that off, blam! I don't like that shit, right? And they're like, oh, okay. So later on we see April O'Neil interviewing the scientist who's got this device, what looks like some kind of weird ray gun sort of thing, and some new sort of invention. Shredder and his goons drop in, steal this device. Turtles show up, kind of fight it off of them, and then eventually Michelangelo and the Rock Soldier are holding onto it at the same time when it explodes and backfires, and they both get really zapped. And Michelangelo is okay more or less, but the Rock Soldier goes through this personality change where he's like, man, you got to follow your own path and do what you want to do. And he suddenly becomes really into music, and he's at a concert. He's like, peace and love, man. You know, so he doesn't want any more of this fighting. And later on, when he gets back to Dimension Q or wherever the hell he was from, I don't think it was X now that I think about it, it was Dimension Q or something like that. He's sitting there and he's like, man, what do I do now? I could go back to Krang, but... and he crushes the communicator and he says, you got to make your own way, man. So kind of just a fun little adventure. Next two up are the next two in the ongoing Turtle series, 134 and 135. This one picks up with Mona Lisa kind of broadcasting over the airwaves after the fake Mutant Ninja Turtles attack on Baxter Stockman, the mayor, and she's reporting on just the pandemonium and the riots that's spreading through the city. So we see Jenny scramble to go and to Sheena's apartment and make sure she's okay, and everybody there is like breaking down doors and dragging people out, and it's just chaos. So she gets in a big battle with some mutants and kind of saves Sheena. Donatello, meanwhile, at the Splinter Clan headquarters is like, I gotta go, I gotta do something. So he leaves Sari, the young Triceraton that escaped to Earth from the Utroms, and their friend Carmen. He leaves them in charge of kind of home base, and he goes out, and along the way he mentally telepaths with Venus again, but she's like, I can't help you, Donatello, I'm not ready for that. And eventually who does he end up fighting? He ends up fighting, the reason he left headquarters is because, remember at the end of that last issue, there was that big explosion that hurt Angel, and standing in the aftermath of it was this new group of mutants led by the dog-looking guy I mentioned. So Donnie was going to make sure Angel was okay and recover her. So he does so, and along the way he's like, oh, this looks like, he's finding some broken parts on the ground, and he's like, this looks like Utrom technology. So then eventually Casey Jones joins the fray. Donatello gets back to headquarters and says, I'm sorry I was gone so long, I shouldn't have left you guys in charge here, but I got an idea. And the last thing we see before the issue ends off is that weird little crystal that Donatello was I don't know if I mentioned that from the last one, but he's got this little crystal that has powers, and his idea involves this crystal, and we see him kind of doing some of those the 9 cuts moves that Oroku Saki taught them, and he's doing all these calculations on the crystal. So he's obviously up to something with this crystal. In the second issue, we see him working on the crystal idea at the start again, and we see that at what's going on at the rest in the background at the Splinter Clan headquarters is we see Sari and Carmen and the rest of them having fun and just trying to get along despite all this chaos. And we see a new mutant in the building, and if you had paid close attention to the end of a couple issues ago with those mutants that came in led by the dog, this mutant was part of that group, and he's kind of in the headquarters. I'm not sure how he slipped in, but he's kind of following Sari around, and in the end he tries to attack her near the end of the issue, and they fight him off, and he ends up being like a robot, and inside at the end this Utrom bursts out of the body and goes flying to attack them, sort of thing. And then also along the way, Sally and what's his name? I forget that guy's name. Sally and another mutant get kidnapped by the fake Ninja Turtles. So Jenny goes to rescue them, and she's joined by Alopex, who has come back, and also Raph ends up finding Hob with help from that little crab guy, one of his old pals, and he enlists Hob to join in the fight. So Raph and Hob are also on the scene as they track down these fake Ninja Turtles, and of course a battle looks like it's about to ensue there, but the issue ends before we see actually what happens there. So that's kind of how those ones end. Shifting gears, but still staying in the Turtles universe, we now come to a few issues that involve this whole Rat King Armageddon game plan he's got going on. So first up is issues 2 and 3 of the Armageddon game. And in it we see the major plot lines going on here is it starts off, we see the aftermath of the fake turtle attack on Baxter Stockman, how he talks them down, and some of the soldiers or bodyguards fight them off, and one of them is really sussy about this, and he's like, and she's kind of like, is that the turtles? Or like, she's kind of questioning the whole thing. Also, we catch up with who is it, Mikey and Leo, I think, who have gone to Dimension X, and remember they're talking to the neutrinos, and they weren't able to help, but they did loan them a couple of their people to go with them. So we see Princess Trib, another neutrino, catch up with them, and she wants to be involved, and their overall plan is to head to Dimension Z, I think it is, to look for somebody that's going to help them. And eventually we learn that this person's name is Zix. He's not very cooperative. There's obviously some sort of history, and he doesn't want to go, and they kind of have to, it gets a little contestual, is that a word? And to get there, they actually use Cuddly the Cowlick. If you read the original Archie Ninja Turtle series from the 80s, he's like this interdimensional kind of space traveling thing, and it's just a giant cow's head, and basically you travel in him by him scooping him up in your mouth, sort of thing. So he gets involved in the action. These are actually the issues where you actually see Raph make contact with Hob. I mentioned it happened in the other one. He was at the confronting the fake turtles, but these are the books where you actually see him catch up to Hob and convince him to help. We also see, after the kidnap attempt, we see the fake turtles then move on to plant bombs at the TCRI building and bring it down. And I'm trying to think if I missed anything. Oh yeah, the other main thing is we see the Rat King check in with some of his people, and right at the end of the second issue here, remember he caught the big alligator leatherhead mutant that had the Utrom inside of him. So he's basically had Dr. Barlow, the mad doctor that was working on Donatello before they rescued him, turn this creature into what, on the very last page of the second issue, announces himself as Metal Krang. So not sure where that's going, but could get a little hairy. They've done another subset of this whole Rat King thing called the Alliance. The Armageddon game, the Alliance. So in this one, basically Karai, who's leading the Foot Clan and who has agreed to partner with the Turtles and help out in this whole defend the city against the Rat King game, she wakes from a dream where Shredder attacks her, but it seems unreal because his attacks are clumsy and stuff like that. So all of a sudden there's this guy named Masato or something like that who talks to Karai about how important the Foot Clan is to him, and how her leadership hasn't been good because she just acquiesces to everybody, like agreeing to partner with the Turtles, blah blah blah. So this whole issue is basically her ruminating on this conversation with this guy and questioning her decisions and the future of the Foot Clan and what direction she should take it in. And at the end of the issue, she ends up visiting Bebop and Rocksteady and says, you know, I've got plans. I want you two to help me. We're going to rebuild the Foot Clan in a vision I have in my mind. We're going to instill fear. We're going to instill safety. We're going to instill hope. We're going to rule by any means necessary, and we're going to be powerful, and this thing's going to be great. And that's, so you don't know what's coming, but she's come to some sort of a decision, and yeah, I'm not sure if it's going to be good for the Turtles or not. You know, we will find out, but I have a feeling not. if I were a betting man, which I'm not. The last 3 Turtles issues are all back issues from the original Archie series back in the day. Number 53. In this one, it starts with, in Jerusalem, we see this temple where all these basically brainwashed idiots, all religions is basically what that is, right? All chanting in this temple and whatever, and trying to invoke a spirit or whatever, and eventually this big purple blotchy thing named the Animus is born of this chanting, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna bring about hell on earth, right? Like, he's all about to raise hell. So after that happens, we see April O'Neil and her friend Oyuki, I think her name is, arrive in Jerusalem, there to for some sort of news story that they're going to be working on, and they've got all this baggage with them, and turns out, oh, they've got the turtles with them, hidden in the baggage. So they are met by an official looking government type who says, April O'Neil, I'm going to be your guide through the old city tomorrow, so just chill out, and we'll get her done, right? But soon enough, the city is raided by a bunch of people that are out of their mind, and along with these people which is all stems from these followers with their chanting and their invoking, and a couple of monsters come with them. This big eagle man looking thing and a big tiger with like 4 arms man thing, and everything's going crazy. So the turtles naturally have to skedaddle and help combat this situation. And this tour guide that was supposed to help April, we see her turn into this almost like a Silver Surfer kind of looking hero named Golani, and she's obviously some sort of defender of this region, and she engages the Animus along with the turtles. Issue number 54 picks right up after the last one. The battle is still ongoing. Eventually they have to lick their wounds and regroup, and their plan afterwards is to raid the Animus's headquarters at night, and kind of get the drop on things that way. They end up doing so. They have to bat some of his followers out of the way along the way, but they do eventually reach his hideout in his chambers, and they come up with a clever plan on how to actually bring him down, and coincidentally what to do with him afterwards as well, which is pretty funny. Last, issue 55. Basically, the turtles are flying back in a cargo plane from Jerusalem back to New York. They're excited to get home. Mikey's injured. He got kind of blinded, or his eyes got affected during all the fighting, and the plane's hit by lightning and it's going to crash, and they're, I'm not sure how all this works, but there's some sort of time travel element involved. We see a duplicate Donatello and Raphael from the future in and around the same area where the plane crash happens, find an island where the mighty mutanimals got ambushed by a bunch of aliens and destroyed. They were all killed, and the turtles land on the island and are attacked by Slash, who just sees all the mutanimals dead, and he's like, you killed them, and he freaks out. But then Mondo Gecko's girlfriend is also on the island, and she comes out of hiding and says, no, it wasn't the turtles, it was this. So she gives them the backstory on what happened. So then they try and figure out if they can manipulate events time travel wise to prevent the mighty mutanimals from perishing, but I don't think they're able to do so. So they end up going to save the turtles from the past that got in the plane crash. So you see, that's where you end up seeing the duplicate turtles kind of hanging out together, sort of thing. So it's, anytime there's time travel involved, I always get confused. I always find it a little difficult to follow in many situations, and this is just another example of that. But either way, good issues. Mighty Mutanimals died, so that's pretty momentous, right? Especially back in the day in an Archie cartoon, to have characters die, right? That was a big deal. But yeah, I love those old Archie Turtles cartoons. They were the shit for me when I was younger. G.I. Joe and Transformers were the two biggest, but Turtles came along after those series had finished and kind of were my next big thing. And they were so easy to read, and there wasn't as much text in them. There was more action, and they were very cartoony. So they're just very easygoing comics, and I enjoy reading them every bit as much today as I did back when I was a dumb 11, 12-year old. I haven't really changed much since then. On to Transformers, and for Transformers during November, we only have 2 issues, both the next two of the Shattered Glass series. So it's issue number 3 and issue number 4. In this one, it's a remember the last one was Blaster and Rodimus and Slicer removed his head at the end of his mission that he failed. Um, we see Slicer head back away from where they were, and he ends up going to Metroplex. Metroplex looks like he's buried in the ground and just his head is sticking up. And Slicer ends up going inside of Metroplex, who is considered a Titan. Because you know how big he was. He was massive. He was city-sized, right? So he goes inside, and Metroplex is basically unresponsive. He's not moving. They can't get him to work. Inside Metroplex's inner hallways, it's dark, it's dank, but Slicer gets to one room, and there's this big yellow kind of, not a vat, but a big chamber that's alive with energy, and inside of it is Starscream's Spark, which is an interesting development, because I really hope it gets set free, because who doesn't love Starscream, even though he's an asshole, right? So Slicer's talking about finding a way to get Metroplex working, and delivering him to Ultra Magnus to use as a tool. Obviously, who doesn't want a Titan at their disposal? Goldbug shows up on the scene though and starts needling Slicer and giving him the business, and Slicer's just trying to work and do whatever. And Goldbug he thinks he's stronger and better than he is. He's a little tyrant that thinks he's a ruler, and Slicer's just putting up with them to try and get as much information out of him as he can before he kind of dispatches them. But he doesn't have to do so, because in the meantime, Jetfire shows up and crushes Goldbug to death and confronts Slicer, and they end up fighting a little bit, and in the end, the rest of the Wreckers, Rodimus and those guys, show up and capture Jetfire, so they've got him in their possession now. And then in the second issue, we see it start off with Megatron walking into a bar full of Decepticons who have lost some comrades, and sorry, he's saying, giving them his condolences and stuff, and they're a bit wasted on the I don't know, whatever kind of alcohol Transformers drink, and so Flame War and some other bots decide to mount an assault on Slicer and his crew. So they head out to Metroplex's location and they start fighting. It's at first it's not going well, then the tide turns, yada yada, but the action is still going on as the issue concludes, and Metroplex is up and mobile now, and into the fray too. So that can't be good for Megatron and his forces, because he's huge, you're little. Doesn't matter how many of them there are, right? When all he has to do is step on you, good luck. But Megatron's never one to, back down from a challenge. Like Han Solo, don't tell him the odds. last up, the 300th and final issue of G.I. Joe. $6.99 for this one. In it, everything is culminating on Cobra Island at the casino. Storm Shadow and those guys are in the jungle fighting off all the Cobra troopers. Cutter and Shipwreck in the whale get into the fray as well. Get inland to get into the fray. Duke and the guys in the air are inbound as well. And meanwhile, Snake Eyes, remember at the end of the last issue, the clone of Snake Eyes Dr. Mindbender made came out of the vat. He at first signals allegiance to Genghis Serpentor Khan, but it's all a feint. It's all a fake. He immediately starts slicing and dicing Cobra troopers and making his way out of the facility, and eventually reunites with Scarlet. And this is the real Snake Eyes. Like, it's a direct clone of Snake Eyes. It's not, Sean or whatever, the different guy that isn't really Snake Eyes. That's a whole convoluted storyline. Don't even get me into it, because I'm not sure I even understand it. But so that's where things are going. And then at the end of the issue, the way the issue concludes, is that Duke and the guys in the big cargo plane that's being flown by Wild Bill takes some fire, and I think one of their wings is really damaged. They lose some engines, so that plane is going down, and it is pointing directly at Cobra Island at the casino. So it's on a crash course for the casino. And also within the Cobra Casino, Serpentor Khan has decided, instead of being taken captive by the Joes, he's going to go out in a blaze of glory, and he wants to trigger this, as Dr. Mindbender calls it, a mutant zombie bomb or something like that. And Dr. Mindbender's like, are you crazy? You can't do that. And he's like, no, I'm going to do it. So those two things are happening as the issue ends. And the last thing we see is a little panel that says, "To be continued?" ? So obviously, the 300th and final issue probably won't be the final issue. I don't think there's going to be a 301 from this line. They seem to be done with it, but because I think IDW is done with the G.I. Joe. I don't know if their contract ran out or how things work in the comic industry, but it sounds like they're not going to be doing any more Joes. So I don't know if it's being passed on to another company, or if IDW is still going to be doing it, but on a lesser scale, like a different way of, like, I don't know how it works, but the way they ended it, there's going to be more G.I. Joe. There better be more fucking G.I. Joe.